Hey there, America. You are listening and watching the DMZ America Podcast for Thursday, November 21st, 2024. Coming to you from the left, I'm editorial cartoonist Ted Rall.
And I'm editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis, coming to you from the right.
And so today's topic is Trump's concentration camps. Are there going to be any? And if so, what will they look like? So before people start to take issue with the term concentration camp, I just want to remind people what a concentration camp is. A concentration camp is a facility that is used to detain mass groups of people against their will, and usually, but not always, in an effort to transit them somewhere else. So, for example, Guantanamo Bay is a concentration camp by definition. The Manzanar, the Japanese American internment situation, that was a concentration camp. There's been confusion because of the Nazi experience, where the term concentration camp was conflated with death camp.
Nazi experience. It makes it sound like it's a ride at like Disney, and well, the Nazi experience.
So that's a fair point, but concentration camps and death camps are not the same thing. All death camps are, well, not actually. You could have a death camp that's not a concentration camp. If everyone's just taken there and just killed, then it's not a concentration camp.
Well, it's not a camp at all. It's a
right.
process.
Then it's a murder facility. So right. Yeah, I guess it's true. All death camps are concentration camps, but not all concentration camps are death camps. And so I guess what we need to get into is Donald Trump has promised to have the biggest mass deportations in U.S. history. He's very, very serious about that. The other day, he confirmed on social media that he does plan to go ahead with these plans immediately on day one, as he puts it. And basically, it depends on, sort of what reporting. The reporting's been really mixed. On the one hand, the conventional wisdom has been that the military would not be involved. Trump's now saying the military would be involved.
Yes.
Conventional wisdom was that ICE would take the lead, and that they'd be the sole agency involved, and that they are shorthanded. But now ICE is talking about hiring and expanding their operations so that they would have more personnel to help them do this. Also, conventional wisdom had been that ICE would continue its current priorities, which is to go after illegal immigrants, not people who are asylum seekers, and to go after people who have criminal records or who are alleged to have committed a crime or are being sought in connection with an arrest warrant in the United States. Now, that would still continue, but the wisdom is that it also civilians would be targeted, and that asylum applicants who came in legally, they applied through the official system under the Biden administration, that asylum status could just be summarily revoked by the administration, by President Trump, which is true. He could do that. And so it's a pretty, if this is the case, this would be a radical undertaking with breathtaking civil liberty and other implications, not to mention just it would force us to reassess our view of ourselves as a country and what we're about, and in going forward. It would be the first, I think, major test of what Trumpism means in its second iteration. So, Scott, what do you think? What do you think this is going to look like?
Well, the optics are what's going. I know that that sounds superficial, but in this instance, it's not. First and foremost, I mean, the civil liberty questions involved in this are mind-numbing. Not to mention, Trump has said that he's going to declare a national emergency. Well, unless you're some boneheaded, dipshit in Mississippi, who thinks that this is a national emergency, it's not a national emergency. Is it a problem? It is. Should it be managed? Yes. Before I get my, the conservatives, he's not really of the right. I'm very strongly libertarian. So I think I need to establish that quickly and succinctly to tell the listeners and our viewers that indeed, this is, for me, a conservative, albeit libertarian cause. Immigration is a good thing for the country. It always has been. It grows our population, which is not growing, it's shrinking, which means it grows our economy. I'm a capitalist running capitalist pig, and I love capitalism. And
that's why you will be sent to my camp.
Yes.
But you'll have a really nice tent, though, I promise.
Oh, great. And some drying materials, I hope, before I'm sent to,
sure.
You need to shower,
Sure.
We joke about this, but what we're talking about here, just logistically, what was maybe the most frightening moment of this, and I try not to be hysterical. I try to say, okay, this is, this may work. This is how this is going to be accomplished. But the guy whose name escapes me at the moment is going to be effectively the immigration czar.
Tom Homan.
Tom Holman. And he was on one of the Fox Talking Head shows this weekend and talking very calmly, very reassuringly. Well, this isn't going to be a wholesale. There aren't going to be camps. Well, then Donald Trump says there will be camps. And we're going to address that in a moment. There's going to have to be camps, kids. You can't not do what they're proposing and not have camps. But we're going to start with individuals who are already in prisons. We're going to extradite them. Now, so many questions. Where are you going to send them? I mean, who wants
them?
Well, who wants them? And by the way, we have a lot of Nicaraguans now illegally immigrating to the United States. You got to send them back to Mexico. It's like, you want to.
But they're not Mexican. Yeah.
No. And again, will Mexico allow the planes to land?
Probably not. I mean, Mexico has been they've been sort of serving as a way station for migration from the Northern Triangle countries of Central America.
Yeah.
And they basically, they're a transit point, and they've been okay. And they've worked with the Biden White House to remain a transit point, but they don't want to be the final, the final arrival point for, say, Nicaraguans.
No, and they don't, they understand the strain it puts on their infrastructure. I mean, that's the reason we're doing it, really. At least the people who are addressing this in a practical, humane way. But Ted, I was at a hockey game, a very, very minor league hockey, the Southern Professional Hockey League. The Birmingham Bulls were playing. The parking lot had between 2,500 and 3,000 cars. That's it. It wasn't, and that was a clusterfuck. And that runs about as smoothly as that type of thing can do. I would challenge anyone listening.
And as you said earlier, when you mentioned this to me, everybody there wanted to be there. They paid.
Yeah. I mean, and they paid to go to park, let alone go to the game. Right. So now multiply that and make it 1 million human beings who are not there.
And this could be up to 10 million. I mean, we don't really have good numbers on this, which just all goes to show how ridiculous this whole, or how challenging this endeavor would be, right? I mean, we don't know what percentage of the 10 or 12 million people who've entered the United States, say across the southern border, since 2020. We don't know, okay, how many of them are people who came on tourist visas and overstayed? How many people snuck across the border and were never encountered by Border Patrol? How many people were admitted which we should have an exact number, but we don't. How many people were admitted into the United States? Apparently over 300,000 unaccompanied minors were then released to random dudes into the United States crossing the border. And we don't know where they are or what they're doing, but it's probably not good for a lot of them. One dude signed up he agreed to take 2,500 kids. Now he's either this is the ultimate sequel to the old TV show 8 is Enough, or this is not. This is a human trafficking situation.
Yeah, and let's bear in mind, even those instances were small potatoes. They were nothing, minuscule compared to the numbers Trump and his minions are talking about now. To say that there won't be concentration camps, as I mentioned earlier, Donald Trump said, "Yeah, we're going to have concentration camps,"
and there were under both Obama and Trump 1.0. There were. That's what the kids in cages were. They were concentration camps.
So we're going to have camps. It's especially just like I said, the initial numbers. It's just going to be 1 million, Ted. Just 1 million. That's all.
Only 1 million.
That's a lot of people. That's a lot of things. I would challenge you, if you're listening or watching right now, go out and gather 1 million pebbles. just to give you a sense of what a million actually is.
Mhm.
Now, trying to organize them, move them around, this is going to be horrific. This is going to be as un-American a thing as I can possibly imagine. It flies in the face of everything that is America.
Why? I mean, the argument's going to be these people they don't have legal status. There's nothing American about them. They shouldn't be here. A sovereign state defends its borders and controls its borders. Who the fuck are these people? They shouldn't be here.
Well, first and foremost, they're dead ass wrong in terms of that they don't have rights. They absolutely, anyone who steps on American soil is protected by the U.S. Constitution, and hence due process. This kind of leapfrogs a lot of the due process apparatus, doesn't it? And in fact, they already have, not even with Trump being in office, have scooped up people who should have been scooped up and sent back, who were here legally, had gone through all of the machinations that it takes to become a legal resident, and then hopefully on the road to citizenship. To say that they're not Americans, they're not protected, they have no rights, is horseshit. They absolutely, and that may, upset you, and I'm sorry, but I think it's a damn good thing that people are protected by the Constitution. This will be the test.
But these guys do. I mean, look. These people do have constitutional protections, and they'll have immigration attorneys who will try to avail them to protect us. But my understanding, talking to an immigration lawyer about this recently on my other show, on the TMI show, was that there's basically these people, the courts don't protect their rights because it's not considered a legal proceeding. These are considered administrative hearings. So therefore, they're not in a court of law. They're often detained there's been people who've been waiting for a court date in these detention facilities, which exist already, right? Some of them are part of county jail systems. They're in private contracted prisons and such. And there are people who've been waiting to come up before an immigration judge for 5 fucking years. And that's, of course, the courts are already backed up. Nobody's getting a hearing in under a year and a half currently. So, that unless they radically expand, and I don't think they're going to do that, the hearing, they're just, right. So they're saying basically it's an administrative process. So, I mean, here's what I think, Scott. You tell me if I'm wrong. I suspect you're not going to. Is like, so if Trump proceeds with this plan, they're going to scoop up a whole shit ton of people, dump them into a system that is already choking full and can't process the people who are already in it. Yeah. This is the only funnel out is to countries that, for the most part, they're certainly not going to increase the number of people that they're taking. They may decrease it as a result, but so there's no exit. So the camp system of prisons, basically America's Gulag Archipelago, to coin a term, is going to expand dramatically, and these people are going to sit and stir. And I guess, right? I mean, that's the only. I don't see any other way.
Sprawling refugee camps, and that's going to, all the things that come from that. That's going to resentment, radicalism, gangs, crime. It's going to be. One advantage, one group of people who are thrilled to death that all this is happening, Ted, can you guess?
The prison industrial complex?
There you go. Yay! That's why I love doing this with you, because you're one of the smart ones. The private prison stocks have gone through the roof because presumably they're the ones who are going to manage this, give them powdered ham for lunch or whatever they do to cut costs as much as they possibly can and turn a profit. They're loving this. They can't wait. They're chomping at the bit. This is great news for a really reprehensible industry, quite frankly. The fact that the American government handed off running its prisons, which were none too great to begin with, to a private company whose sole purpose is to turn a profit, by the way. You can't govern if your whole motivation is to turn a profit. That just, this whole bullshittery that, we need a businessman in there and run it like a business. Well, it's not a business for the very simple reason it doesn't turn a profit. I mean, I'm sorry, welfare, making sure somebody has food to eat doesn't turn a profit. Making sure they have a place to live doesn't turn a profit. That's the difference between government and what many of us, myself included, yeah, I'm a warm and fuzzy libertarian, think that's part of the function of government, but also it's not a function of business. So this whole thing is just teed up to be a horrific clusterfuck of enormous potential. Now, again, if you believe in civil liberties and you believe that this is a very, very bad idea, you are comforted at night. I can fall asleep knowing that Donald Trump is a lazy motherfucker and has very, very bad follow through. He promised a lot of things in his first term. He never even touched. Did. So, but he's
there was going to be what was it? Repeal and replace Obamacare.
Yeah, well, I love that. That was one of the classic moments in the debate when he said, "Well, he has a concept of a plan."
Yeah, that was in this debate.
Yes, yeah. And that's only been 8 years since he had a chance to think things over.
Yep, true. Absolutely no. There were no. I mean, and then of course we're going to build a big, beautiful wall, which he did start. Yes. But Mexico was going to pay for it. That was never going to happen.
Of course not. It was what level of bullshit and what level of moron believed him when he said that? Well, we found out 51% of the American voters, apparently. So I've been babbling here, Ted. What's your take? What do you think? Looking at what he has said, looking at what he's put in place and the people he has put in place, what do you suspect are we going to see in the next year to 18 months?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, and I do want to delve into, just to give you a heads up, into the political implications of all this. Will there be a price for the Republicans to pay for doing this? But what it's going to, I mean, there's going to be pushback. Obviously, Democrats don't have a lot they can do because they don't have a majority in either house of Congress. The Supreme Court, I don't know how they're going to weigh in here. That to me is a complete wild card. This court is it's 6-3 conservative, but they do have this seems like the kind of move that might pique even some of the conservative justices to not be so excited about it. They have a strong. These are Federalist Society people, a lot of whom are libertarian in orientation. So I could see SCOTUS not loving this, but maybe slamming on the brakes, or maybe just some federal court somewhere. But the thing is, I want to be really clear. The victims of this policy don't really have a lot that they can do. I mean, for example, let's say you're the father and the sole caregiver for a 16-year-old child. Unless that 16-year-old child is like severely mentally or physically handicapped, you can't go to a judge and say, this kid is a legal citizen. I'm not. I need to stay with my kid because otherwise this kid will become an orphan. That's not actually a cause of action in a U.S. court at this point. It should be. But it's not. And it's not. So they don't have really a lot of protections. I mean, the laws, and Democrats and Republicans are equally guilty. They have not looked out for the rights of this population, and they've helped set the stage now for what's about to follow. So, and there's also going to be economic implications as well, obviously, because they're not just immigrants; these are workers, right? So, people are going to suddenly find themselves without employees. They need to be replaced. It's going to create it's going to increase labor shortages where they already exist. Yeah. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen is there's going to be raids on workplaces, which are going to cause people to be afraid to go to work. There's going to be knocks in the middle of the night, by ICE. And if the military, I suspect that the way that ICE will carry out the raids, because that's their job and they do that. The military will probably handle the logistics for the camps. Yeah, the camps will be in remote places. Journalists will not be permitted to visit them or even to come anywhere near them, to the extent that journalists still exist anyway. I don't mean that because of Trump. I mean, just there aren't any left really. So So I think this will be, the public will only witness this in places like where I'm living in New York City, where it's like the population is dense and you can't like drag someone out of their apartment without, all the neighbors knowing and seeing, and It could cause unpleasantness. There's all sorts of, but that's going to happen, right? They're going to drag these people away, and that's going to play really well to the base. But Scott, how do you think it's going to look politically?
Yeah.
Is anyone going to care? And I really don't think they will. And that includes Democrats.
This is a Ted Rall type of moment. And here's what I mean by that. And I think it's the biggest question we're addressing in this podcast right now. How will America react? Where is the soul of America?
That is a Ted Rall question. It's what I've always been obsessed with. It's why I majored in Vichy France. When I was a history major, my concentration was Vichy France. You have the French people under Nazi occupation had a choice: join the resistance, keep your head down and just try to get by, which is what most people did, or collaborate. We have that choice now. What kind of people are we? Who are we?
And that is, I haven't said this publicly, but I don't know what the answer to that is anymore. I used to. I could have told you even in the darkest days of the 60s, I was 10, but I could have told you in the 70s, 80s, that if you had suggested, even the suggestion of establishing a chain of concentration camps in the United States, let's just call them camps. They won't call them concentration camps. They'll call them,
detention facilities.
Yeah, it'll have some kind of
transit facility.
Exactly. Some kind of bullshittery will be layered on this to try to make it palatable. But Americans are going to see this. Too many people have, cameras in their pockets, that this can't go unnoticed or undocumented. Then you jump to things like when Trump and his minions and Americans agree, by the way, left and right, that you should be able to censor news sites. So does that start? The implications in the overarching facts that can come from this are so dire. And it comes back to, flatter my friend Ted, to a Rawlian question: where is the American soul right now? And what I loathe to say is we just saw America decide that it wanted to be a bro nation. Clovis is down with it, right?
Yeah. Well, Clovis wants the importation, not the deportation of many voles.
Many what?
Voles.
Oh, voles.
They're like field mice. He wants to say hello to them. He means them no harm.
That's what was, and Ted, I go back to this conversation on the weekend with the immigration czar. It was chilling to see how cold and ruthless this was.
Yeah.
I guess the question
he's a bastard. And I guess you could argue Trump and his people think it's going to take a bastard to carry something like this out.
Let me ask you. Let me ask you that. I'm going to throw the same. This is a ginormous question. I'm not sure I've answered it, so come back to me if I haven't. Where is the American soul on this? We start seeing footage of these sprawling camps in the Nevada desert. Don't forget the camps for the Japanese internment camps were all over the United States. Manzanar, is that
mostly? Where was that? Montana or Idaho? Something
but
like that.
They had one in Madison, Wisconsin. It's called Turtle Island, and they had one there. These were all over the United States, by the way. And that's
no one cared.
Nobody really cared. And in fact, the Supreme Court.
And it was ordered by a Democratic president, FDR.
Yeah.
Nobody cared. Okay, look, so let's put this into focus, right? So the Japanese, the Nisei, right? The Japanese Americans who were sent to those camps, which includes George Takei, right? Who played Mr. Sulu on Star Trek.
And
as a little kid, he was in one of those camps.
Yeah, he's created a musical about it.
Yeah, and it's like, so he's so the point is that the American people, the non-Nisei, I mean, some of them were opposed to it, and there was a lawsuit, the Korematsu decision, that went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and to its eternal shame, the Supreme Court ruled against Mr. Korematsu and Fred Korematsu.
I thought it ruled against the camps.
No, it ruled for the camps and for the administration due to the exigencies of wartime. And in fact, the Korematsu decision was cited by the Bush administration in its defense of Guantanamo Bay and denying habeas corpus to what it called enemy combatants, even though the term enemy combatants does not exist in any American law. They just made it up. It doesn't exist. I mean, these are prisoners of war, right? They're even detainee isn't really a term in American law. But anyway, they were trying to deny them their rights. Korematsu remains the law of the land to this day. So I guarantee you, mark my words, Korematsu will be cited as under this national emergency when the federal government files its legal opinion justifying this, because there will be many, many court battles. So it was World War II. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. The American people were pissed, and so it's easy to see like how the Japanese Americans got othered, especially people who didn't live in places with a high Japanese American population, who hadn't gotten to know any of them. But these people are not enemies by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, even the nativists and the xenophobes in the Trump administration and in the MAGA movement have never characterized them as enemies. They have portrayed them as dangerous, right? They're sending us rapists. They're sending us murderers. There's the Venezuelan gangs that, were seen in that Aurora, Colorado apartment complex. There's that sense of that there's gang violence, but most Americans do not view these people as anything other than economic migrants. And the biggest threat, if any, from them, most people would say, is they might steal your job or drive down wages. So is that, I mean, I'm not going to address whether any of that is true or not. That's not the subject of this discussion, although it's a discussion worth having.
Sure.
I just don't think that, but I think it's like, how much sympathy we already know that Latinos voted for Trump and they know about this policy. Some of them either don't care or they don't believe that he's really going to do it. But we already know that Latino solidarity between like Latinos who've already gotten here, they don't really care that much about the Latinos who want to come here. And maybe they shouldn't, maybe they should, but they don't. And as for other ethnic groups, these are other ethnic groups. It's like, these are Central Americans and Mexicans. Do we care? And I don't know how many heartstrings are really going to be pulled or tugged at. I'm
asking for an answer to that, though, Ted.
I don't like my answer, Scott.
I don't like mine either.
I don't think they give a shit. I think the American people do not fucking care. I don't think they're gonna care. I think they could see the most heartbreaking images of children being taken away from their parents, and they're just not gonna give a shit. I don't like it at all. I don't want that to be true. People who know me will be surprised to hear, but I'm an optimist. That's why I do this. It's because I keep thinking we can move the needle. And it really, the argument, it's not legal and it's not economic, right? It's about like common decency. It's about, what we used to call Christian values. You don't, if someone is a refugee and you have room to take them in and you do take them in, you don't take them in and then kick them out. That's not right. That it's not and they may not have any legal status, whatever, and you can lawyer this all you want, but it ain't right. So I think we're going to see, when Bush and then Obama and then Trump expanded the drone wars, I remember telling my mom, who was still alive, I mean, people are going to see this and going to say it's just fucking horrible. We're assassinating people. They're walking down the street and then we're blowing them up without cause, without any fucking legal basis. My mom said, no one will give a shit because they're brown. And, she was right. She was usually right about things like this. And I think, so when you ask me that question, I'm thinking, what would my mom say? My mom would say, they won't care. And, I mean, most people in Europe did not care when their Jewish neighbors were thrown onto trains and deported to the East. They just didn't care. Or they didn't care enough to fucking do anything about it. There was Hitler's Willing Executioners is a book that I strongly recommend. And it basically sort of addresses the idea that, like, during World War II, that Nazi troops were, they were afraid for their lives. If they didn't carry out the Holocaust, they themselves would be shot for disobeying orders or something like that. And I think Goldfarber is the author's name. He goes into the archives. He finds that that's totally not true. Yeah. It's like, in fact, at the beginning of the war, when they first started these, like what they called actions in occupied Poland and in Belarus to round up civilians, they said, hey guys, okay, so tonight we're going to go out and do some rough shit. We're going to be beating up like civilians, children, grannies. And if this is too much for you, you can stay in the barracks. You don't have to come. And step forward. No one will ever hold it against you. Some German troops stepped forward and said, that's too much for me. And they remained behind in their barracks. Goldfarber went into their service files and found that they had never been punished. They were never discriminated against. They were not slowed down in their promotion, in their military ranks, or in getting a raise. Nothing was held against them. So and like that was true throughout the Reich. It was policy. It's like they didn't want people who weren't really into it. They wanted, and that makes sense, right? If you think about it, it wouldn't be very logical to do it any other way, because then you kind of like, I mean, how are you going to do that? The idea was, I point a gun at you and like I tell you, shoot that person. That's just not how it was. And so, and in the book, it's almost like blink and you miss it. But they focus grouped the Holocaust. They chose a few. They weren't sure. There was a division in the hierarchy in the Nazi party about whether or not this, in the government, whether or not this would work. They thought that there might be riots and that like people would see their neighbors dragged off and they'd get pissed off and like, start a rebellion. So they were like, well, let's settle this. Being Germans, they did this in a scientific experimental way. So they had a few towns where they focus grouped it. And basically they did a big roundup like that, raised a lot of hell. And then they had spies sit at the police precinct and at local cafes to see if people were agitated. And a few people did come in and complain to the local cop and say, hey, what the fuck? These like goons came in and kidnapped my the granny who lives next door to me in my apartment building. What the fuck is going on? But basically nothing happened. There was no civil unrest. And the conclusion was, we're good. We're good. We can go full throttle. That, to me, that experience is, I think, what we're going to see here in the U.S. People are they might not like it. They might be like, that's a shame. But they're not going to stop it. They're not going to step in and start screaming at a heavily armed cop wearing Kevlar and armed to the teeth. No, I don't think so. I don't think they're going to do anything. I don't think they're going to demonstrate. I think they'll demonstrate over other things first. LGBT rights, I don't know, whatever, something else, not that.
Yeah. No, and I'm like you. I hate the fact that I agree with you. I hate the fact that I think that is exactly where the American soul is today.
I mean, is that where it's always been?
I don't think it comes and goes. I mean, look at how the Irish were treated in the United States. I mean, my God, all the way up until 1959, 1960, when JFK was running, and it was a thing that he was Irish. I mean, it's kind of funny in hindsight, just because it's like, his dad was a multi-bazillionaire. The Irish were, very much ensconced in American culture, had disseminated across, we were living in large numbers in every state. In 1960, this is still a thing. It was so strange. I don't know that this has always been how there's always been a segment that has hated immigrants, always. I mean, from the German influx of the late 1700s, the Irish, the Italians, the Mexicans in the 20th century, there's always been a group that we've hated. I mean, look at the father of editorial cartooning. Our profession was very much in favor of bringing freed slaves fully into the culture, fully into the community. But my God, those Irish, and especially the Catholics, oh my God, the cartoons are so grotesquely racist. I gave a speech about picking good guys and bad guys.
Including by Thomas Nast, right? He was a total anti-Irish.
That's what I'm talking about. Is Thomas Nast, the founder of American editorial cartooning, as you and I would define it, was a horrible anti-Catholic. I mean, and this stuff is horrific. And the way he portrayed the Irish was that they weren't even human.
The papists.
And they were papists. Yes, the papist taint. So we have that in our soul. We have that in our DNA. Everybody does. I mean, that's why I think you're seeing the rise of the right across the globe, in large part because of these mass migrations from Africa, from Latin American countries, depending on what part of the world you live in. The fear of the other, the disdain of the other. We're better. I may live in a trailer and be, have the IQ of a sponge and have 3 teeth, but by gum, I'm better than them. And I think that's a large part of that. And I think given the results of the past election, what the majority of American voters voted for confirms exactly what we're saying here and what their reaction to, well, it serves them right. They shouldn't have been here illegally to begin with, regardless of actual circumstance or the facts. And so
regardless of the fact that every single person who says that has ancestors who came here, mostly illegal, right? I mean, people don't get that. They're like, oh, they flooded across the border. It's like, well, okay, so how is Eagle Pass, Texas any different from from Ellis Island? It's not. The people who arrived at Ellis Island, they didn't have visas. They weren't legal immigrants. They showed up, and the U.S. needed workers. And so, like, if you didn't have TB, and 2 heads, they stamped you in, and you were in and off to the races. And almost, probably half the country is descended from those people, right?
Yeah, and they weren't.
Italian,
my mother,
Irish immigrants, and so on.
And my mother-in-law and other
they're mainstream Americans.
Yeah, no, my Italian-American mother-in-law or mother immigrated here. Well, we were sponsored. No, they weren't. There were no sponsors. You showed up at Ellis Island, and you, they would, listen to your chest, make sure you didn't have TB. They'd ask, how are you feeling today? And you'd say fine, or however you said it in your native language. And you came into the country. You're absolutely right. And it was millions of them. Ted, you're starting to pixelate, so we should probably tie this all up in this very downer mode. You're becoming extremely pixelated. Wow. Are you there?
Yeah, you've broken up a little bit on my end too. Yeah,
it's your fault. Blaming it all on you.
It's always my fault, Scott. Always. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up here. But I mean, let's talk about. I mean, let me see. I'm going to try moving to a different extension. See if.
Yep. Now you're frozen. That's not better.
Better. That looks like it's a little better. Or not.
Oh, no, still very pixelated.
Worse, of course. Let's try.
What is it with New York and your internets? I would just have assumed that you guys would have had the best of the best internet, given that you are the center of the universe, at least in the eyes of New Yorkers.
We're in search of a good connection. I'm like Leonard Nimoy in search of.
You have to talk like this. You have to have these weird pauses in your sentences.
That's true. So yeah, I guess let's talk about so I think we know the political implications will be slim to none. Kamala Harris's recently finished campaign did not talk about this. She did not she did not care about this issue. Obviously it didn't poll well. And so she didn't
Well,
say.
she was and was not the immigration czar, depending on who you talk to. It was
Right.
including her.
No, she kept running away from it for obvious reasons. I mean,
Well, it was embarrassing.
unpopular.
She didn't do her job. I'm not sure. In hindsight, I'm not sure it's because the Biden White House didn't let her. But
I think
regardless, she never went. I'll never forget. That was one of the worst moments when she became vice president. So, are you going down to the border? And she goes, "Why should I?" It's like,
yeah, I haven't been to Europe either, is what she said.
Yeah.
So what do you think if they go ahead with this, in the end, they're just going to end up with a lot of people in camps for the next 4 years, and they'll be released. And they'll be released when a Democrat comes back to power. I would imagine. That's about it, right?
Now, you've been to immigrant camps. I've been to camps that the Germans set up when they were having an onslaught of Turkish immigration and Mideastern immigration back when it kind of started back in the 90s. I was in Berlin in 1992 and visited a couple of the camps, and they were, they're okay, but it's still not near the numbers that we're talking about here. But the people were still treated like shit. And when they were released, when they did jump through all the hoops and all the bureaucratic bullshittery they had to deal with, Ted, they were still released into a culture that hated them and treated them like garbage. Now, and when I would write about it or talk about it, I would have many German friends and German journalists from the right just castigate me. How dare you talk about it like this? How dare you? We're treating them just fine. I go, but you're not. In fact, one trick they would pull is they would release these people into some of the most racist parts of Germany. And that's a high bar, as you might imagine. And before they sent them back to where they came from. The thought was they'd have the shit kicked out of them. They'd be spat upon and treated like crap. Then they'd go back to whatever part of Turkey they were from or the Middle East.
And tell everyone the tale.
There you go. Don't go to Germany because they treat you like shit there and they beat you up.
Lovely.
And then they ship you back.
Charming people all around. So, what do you think there will be any economic implications other than the fact that American taxpayers are going to pay billions of dollars in inflated fees to well-connected Halliburton type corporations to run these camps, and the fact that we're going to lose a lot of workers at a time and I do want to ask you this, Scott. Let me first ask you this. So, as you said, we have a low fertility rate. We don't make enough kids. This is a problem throughout the developed world. Why did President Biden not ever sit down on television with some charts and explain his policy? He did throw the border open. That's true. Why? So when he threw the border open, he had to know, or his people had to know, there's going to be political implications. Shouldn't you explain? Was the idea, if we don't talk about it, if we talk about it, we're adding fuel to the fire, we're giving the Fox News more shit to make fun of, better to just not talk about it at all, better not to engage? Or did they think no one would notice 10 million people crossing the border and just coming in like, hey, we've seen Latino people before, whatever. Or do they just feel it doesn't even cross their minds that they owe an explanation for a radical change in policy to the citizens of the country? I think you and I talked about this the day Joe Biden was sworn in, that there were cognitive issues involved. And I don't know that he was able to do that. Did he explain any of his policies? No.
More than once, by the way. Don't forget, you're talking about, a country of almost 400 million people, and you have to say things more than once. And he never did that. He couldn't. No. I don't think he was capable of it. So when he threw the border open, he needed to say, this is something more than just being vindictive and hateful towards Trump administration policies, which now in hindsight,
and we're not just being nice. It's not like we need these people.
Now the economic implications of this are enormous. Like you said, the Halliburton type, private prisons systems are going to profit greatly from this. But the American system is not. The American taxpayer is going to shell out trillions of dollars on this. Again, do the math. If you're going to house and shelter and feed 10 million people, even if it's the shittiest 3 meals a day.
And taxpayers are going to have to defend these policies in court too.
Right. So to crunch all these numbers, it's going to cost us a fortune in federal budgets. But more importantly, and bigger still, is going to be the impact, assuming for a moment they're successful, and 10 million people leave the United States. That's 10 million people not buying things, Ted.
That's
simple
true.
Things, diapers, food.
Or paying sales taxes, or paying income taxes.
Right.
They do pay income taxes.
They pay sales tax.
One of the things that people don't really realize, it's sort of a quote unquote scam, but it's really not. But in order to work, you need a social security number. And a lot of illegal immigrants will borrow a secret service, a social security number from a friend. And then that will become, and they withhold money from their paychecks, and they don't file a return, of course, or their friend files the return. But the point is, they're paying income tax. Scott, you're muted. You're muted.
So yeah, I'm here at my son's house, and we're watching my grandkid and the dogs upstairs, and they are now apparently doing a track meet. So I didn't want to.
Well, we should wrap it up anyway, but I'll let you have the last word here.
Okay, quickly, the economic implications of this type of the program of this level, 10 million people not buying stuff in this country would be catastrophic. Couple that with, there's a lot of moving pieces, but couple that with the stupid ass tariff ideas, which is the dumbest fucking idea. We have example after example after example, as Ted and I have mentioned several times from the 19th century, where tariffs simply did not work. And every time they tried to fuck with them, especially when they raised them in a significant way, it drove the American economy into decade-long recessions or depressions. Going back to the...
Well, it is pretty funny. Just the other day, I saw some right-wing MAGA guy saying, in the 19th century, we only had tariffs and no income tax, and we had so much money. Okay, well, that last part is not true.
No,
we did not. The U.S. government did not have much money. They were broke. It's the income tax that changed that.
It changed that. The tariffs were a de facto tax. You can't say that.
Well, there's that too. That's true. They are.
I'm an importer. If I'm importing,
and it's a regressive and tariffs, and that's a regressive tax.
Very
regressive. It's a regressive tax because if I buy a TV, it costs the same as if Bill Gates buys a TV. And yet that takes up a higher percentage of my salary.
Exactly. This is just stupid economics. It's stupid politics, and it's just evil. And it hurts.
It is fucking evil. And I think it is. I think it's important. It's not a bad thing to talk about the values and just the common decency aspect, which doesn't come up in our political discussion much. It's very legalistic and it's granular, but more and more. And I don't think this is just because Trump's coming in. People who know us know that we've been fair to Trump. You know what I mean? Like we're not like but we don't love Democrats either.
We have not been. Yeah, true.
We're not on Team Kamala.
We've been very nice to Chase Oliver, though.
We like Chase Oliver. By the way, he's coming back, right? We should have him come back and talk now. This would be a good time to talk to him. So you should reach out to him again.
Okay.
All right, everybody. Stay tuned. We're about to play where you can find all things Scott Stantisian and all things Ted Rallian. So get out your notepads. You can just if you're watching us on YouTube, you can just hit the little pause and write things down. Please subscribe on Rumble. Please subscribe on YouTube. Please consider becoming a paid supporter on Rumble. But that's only when we're live. So you can't really do it for this one, but tune in, do that. And you can follow us on X at DMZ America Show. All right, everyone. Thanks so much. And here comes the scroll. Bye, Scott.
Bye, Ted.